So we talked a little bit about practicing with and without distortion, and I recommended doing half and half just to kind of play it safe. So this way you're still making sure that things are muted okay when you have the heavy distortion on, or even light distortion. And if you do play clean, just remember, like when we get to speed building stuff, like single note things, or anything that you're doing on your own, if you don't have a compressor pedal or some kind of compression on, the clean stuff is going to be much harder to get as fast as you can, because the quiet or the light touch notes or the softly picked notes are not going to come out through the amp so well. So that's one of the downfalls of practicing with no distortion. So have compression on, clean, if you want to practice it that way when you're really pushing the speed. So this way you're not having to work so hard. Hard work is good when appropriate, but we don't need to make things harder than necessary. I like to try and make things as easy as possible so I can go further with things, right? Alright, so working this up to 120. So I'm going to demo this at 60 and 120. I mentioned that if you're going to emphasize any of the strums, it's best to only do it on the down beats. So not every down stroke, just the downbeat itself. That being said, if you feel like you have a tendency to always emphasize every downstroke, try not to emphasize anything, and try and have a nice soft light touch strum the whole time. Stay really relaxed as best as you can, and then try and maintain being relaxed as you go faster. So when we get together again at the next class, I'm going to ask you to demo this stuff. So like number 1, I'll ask you to play it at 60 and 120. Same thing for number 3. I'll ask you to play this at 60 and 120. For number 2, because it's a speed building drill, really going to be determined on how fast you got. Probably ask you to play like 20 beats a minute slower than the fastest thing that you got. And of course the 60 beats a minute. So always like to hear how it sounds at the slow pace too. Make sure everything's spaced well. I just noticed I forgot to put in the chord names. Well, I think you know what they are. So yeah, let's start with number 1. And here we go. 60 beats a minute. 1, 2, 3, 4. So remember, if a mistake is made, if you notice you do that little swing thing, anything gets off at all, stop where you're at and start over again. Now typically, if something is more complex than this, I would recommend, instead of always starting at the beginning, stay where the problem is occurring and polish that part up. Because the rhythm is the same in every bar, I'm going to say just start over again. Yes, just keep starting over. So this way you're always emphasizing the correct playing. Trying to think of something else I wanted to say, but nothing from my mind. Okay, 120. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, number 2, let's play this at some various speeds, all upstrokes. Where is it? 60. 1, 2, 3, 4. Definitely tap your foot while you play. Very good in helping you stay on beat, keeping good rhythm. 120. 1, 2, 3, 4. Wow, I missed the strings. 1, 2, 3, 4. picking hand while you play, just to make sure that you hit the strings. All right, 160, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. You may notice your wrist or your arm position changes when you get faster, and let it happen. Instead of forcing yourself to stay in a specific position the whole time, or always using like a specific part of your hand or wrist or whatever, let your hand do what it wants to in order to hit new, faster speeds. Because the mechanics will change a little bit. You notice, like, I went from having my hand kind of out here at the slower speeds to having my hand more anchored here when I just did that 160. So I'm kind of using the body of the guitar to give me a good anchor point. I just feel more accurate that way. There's it, 180, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. 200, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. 220, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So get to a point where you really got to push this too, but make sure it's accurate. So to get really, 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 really fast, as fast as you can possibly be, you do want to get to a point where you are physically pushing yourself, not just mentally, but physically. In the beginning, it's going to be more mental than anything, making sure that everything's lined up correctly, technique is being performed well, things like that. So people talk about you don't want any tension whatsoever when you're playing. It really depends on what it is. Like, what kind of tension are we talking about? Like, if you're just gripping the hell out of your pick and, just like strumming like that, just like, yeah, you don't want that tension. That's ridiculous. You don't need anything like that. But when I'm doing something like this, there's definitely quite a bit of tension in that arm. I mean, you can see that it's flexing up there, like when I start playing, that's definitely tension coming in there. That's a necessary kind of tension. There will be levels of fatigue, mentally and physically, that will happen. So you are aware of the repetitive strain injury because of the whole mouse issue with work. So if you feel any kind of strains that are similar to what happened when you got your repetitive strain injury, stop. Don't push it any further with that. If it's just muscle fatigue, yeah, push that. Muscle fatigue's fine. That's how we make the muscle stronger. We got to push the muscles to get bigger and better, right? But don't mess with the joint stuff. Yeah, messing with the joints, I've made that mistake. That's why, like, the whole wrist thing that we talked about with the scales, I have to position myself in such a way that this part is not being bent anymore, or at least very, very little. Yeah, messing with the joints is no good. Making the muscles better, good. Messing with the joints, not so good. Those things, they heal so slow. Okay, back down to 60 for number 3 here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Nice and light strumming, best you can. Keep everything sounding evenly spaced. Well, the 16's evenly spaced. Anyway, 120. 1, 2, 3, 4. So, like, the idea is like just the hand moving at a constant pace the whole time. It's like every downstroke and upstroke should be pretty much evenly paced or evenly spaced. Whether you're hitting upstrokes or downstrokes, like with these beats here, beats 1 and 3, you're not hitting any upstrokes there, but you still want try it. The idea is like to have even like the mist or the ghost upstrums should be having about the same pace as even when you're hitting it here. The actual upstrokes. And yeah, there's some tiny speed fluctuations in terms of like hitting strings and whatnot when you're actually hitting an upstroke or not. But the idea, the way I'm looking at it, is trying to make it as evenly spaced as possible. And yeah, when it comes to the scales, you don't. So prioritize these three things that were just demoed here. That's the speed stuff that you want to prioritize. If you have extra time and you want to do more stuff, you're welcome to do so. Like I heard you, when you're doing like metronome with the scales, probably easiest to space things out instead of doing triplets and not hitting that top note twice. Hit the top note twice, so like the C scale. So this way it's not coming down in an awkward way. And then just learn one scale at a time. So once you can play Ionian without looking at the page, then go ahead and start learning Dorian. Once you can do both of those back to back without looking at the page, then add in Phrygian. So take your time, as much as you need, to comfortably have each scale memorized. So it's not a race whatsoever. It's much better to take your time with it and get each shape solid before rushing off to the next one. So definitely take your time. Sometimes, in fact, a lot of the times going the slow route is going to be ultimately the fastest route because you have everything committed to memory a lot better. So if you have any questions with anything, please let me know. And I will see you again next week.